In today's podcast, we're going to talk a little bit about focus, specifically as it relates to a visionary. If you guys are kind of familiar with many times the way companies are set up, you have somebody who runs the company, essentially, so CEO, president of the company, whatever you want to call them. And many times that person has a profile of a visionary. And so it's a person who really kind of thinks at a really high level, and many times has a real difficult time stepping in to really get into the details of a company. And so many times they'll end up hiring an integrator, an operation person, someone to really kind of oversee the day-to-day. Over the last couple of weeks, and kind of being on calls, and then actually on a trip out west. Ended up with a conversation. I noticed that it seems to be many times trying to get that visionary to sit down and focus in certain areas of the business can be very difficult. Actually, I was on a call last week with this client out west, and the administrative assistant of the president of the company was telling me on the phone how they basically she prepares a list of agenda items for a meeting. The company owner will come in and sit down, and it seems to be that owner, that visionary, came up with their best ideas when they were sitting there having a conversation when they were supposed to be working through these agenda items, which kind of brought I wouldn't say frustration, but just kind of like a realization of trying to have to figure out another direction of coming to try to get the visionary to focus, to work through some very important issues in the company. And in my seat, in my company, as I do a lot of strategy calls, and many times I'll get the company owner on those strategy calls and very much see a similar type of struggle as it relates to get the visionary to focus for a great period of time, or even a little bit of a period of time, to work through some important issues. But I think for that visionary, focus is extremely important. And what I'm going to do today is talk about basically 5 different areas where I think a visionary needs to focus within his or her business. And of course, this is not at all exhaustive list. I've talked in previous podcast about KPIs. Of course, as the owner of an accounting firm, and we do a lot of tax strategy. I think tax strategy is important, and that should be something that's part of the focus. But I'm going to kind of step away from the financial a little bit and more look into, as far as more, I think maybe a little bit more into the day-to-day as it relates to focus as the company owner, that visionary, really some of the areas that they need to be looking at regularly. First of all, is that a purpose? So the purpose of a company is really to understand what you do and why you do it. So that visionary really needs to focus and keep the focus in front of them on what it is that they do and why do they do it. And this really needs to be the focus of all the communication that the company has. So everything from internal communication from the visionary, from the company's owner, down to the leaders that work kind of at that next rung down, and as it trickles down, all of that communication really needs to focus, needs to be the purpose of the company needs to be involved in every bit of that communication. It needs to be consistent as well. And the purpose really should be part of the story of all that's communicated as well throughout the company, both internally and externally. Secondly, continuing on that thought, is consistency of message. So messaging internally, messaging externally really needs to be clear, and it needs to be consistent. I was actually on a call earlier today and kind of joking about the company Chick-fil-A. Of course, they sell chicken sandwiches, but the mascot they use is a cow. Okay, and if you didn't understand kind of the brand, that could essentially create some brand confusion. But when we talk about consistency of message, that making sure that all communication and messaging not only is keeping the purpose of the company in mind, but also that you're consistent with your brand. So whatever message that it is that you're wanting to get out there, that everything that you provide, both internally and externally, needs to make sure that it's consistent. If you think of a company that maybe the message really needs to be more of a lighthearted one, versus maybe more of a serious one. I was in a meeting yesterday. In a meeting in regards to a daycare, and I was having a conversation with the owner of the daycare in regards to the content they're putting out, and making sure that understanding that all that content needs to be consistent in the way that it's delivered. And then as you're communicating with your employees, that you come with the same type of a flavor to the message as you deliver it. So consistency of message. Thirdly, focus on people and processes. So a company may have a CEO that oversees the day-to-day, but the visionary of the company really does need to keep people and process in focus. When I talk about people, making sure that there's that relationship with the people in the business, but also making sure that you're putting the right people in the right seats and that you're empowering those people to do the work. And we'll talk about that here in the next point. But a company may have a CEO or an integrator that manages process and people, but the roles and processes themselves need to be at the focus of the owner, or a focus of the owner. Making sure you have all the right people in the right seats and that all the processes are followed, efficient, and managed well. Number 4 is that of empowerment. So one area that the visionary needs to make sure they keep in their focus is to make sure that the employees and the leaders in the business are empowered to do the work. So allowing those that they delegate responsibilities to be empowered to be able to do the work. And then also that people are developed to be able to perform the work at their highest level. So that of empowerment. Number 5, and lastly, relevancy and responsiveness at the personal and at the company level. So making sure that the company is staying relevant, the company is responsive to the third parties, to the clientele, and they're responsive to each other. So responsiveness internally, responsive also to those externally within the business that you're working with. So and also to be connected to the product as well. So always to be connected to the product or the service, connected to the people, and then improving both as the leader and developing those that work with you as well. And then also making sure that the product and the service, the product or service remains relevant. I think maybe one of the most popular stories out there is Blockbuster Video. Of course, back in the not too many years ago, they were the leader as it related to if you wanted to go and rent a video on the weekend, you go to Blockbuster Video. And you go and you rent it, and of course, it had to be returned the next day. Well, Blockbuster never kept up with the times. They never kept their product relevant. And of course, now they are out of business. But making sure that your product stays relevant, that your service remains relevant. So as a business owner, areas of focus. First is on purpose. Secondly, consistency of message. Thirdly, your people and your processes. Fourthly, making sure that you're empowering your team. And fifthly, and lastly, the relevance, that your company stays relevant and that your company also is responsive both internally with each other and then externally as well. Hopefully this podcast was helpful. I would encourage you, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the Belk on Business podcast. Have a wonderful day.